You're listening to Vince and Matt on the Montreal Marketeers podcast.
I'm telling my life story. I'm telling my life story. I'm telling the truth.
We're here with Ratloop Canada, Vivian and James, and I'm really excited to talk about the gaming industry. And I know that Matt, you loved playing video games when you were a child. In fact, you're still a child today, so that's
yes. I still play video games today.
Before we start with Vivian and James, I just want to go back to a certain story of a friend I had. We used to play video games, and we used to play a lot of Madden, NHL, very sports-related games. And 5 seconds before the game would close, he would have this move that he would do called the twister. If he was losing, he'd wrap himself up in the controllers. They would fly and pull out of the unit. Unit would shut down, and nothing happened. He's, you didn't win. That's my story when it comes to gaming. That's the first thing I think of my friend doing that. When we were trying
Good tactic. Yeah.
Good tactic, exactly. Out of game tactic to just really get everyone riled up or play.
Piss everyone off.
Exactly. So James, Vivian, I don't know whoever wants to start first, but tell us a bit about yourself and how this whole Ratloop Canada came about.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'll start. Well, my name's James Anderson, and I've been working in video games for pretty much as long as I can remember. So even when I was a little kid, like maybe 14 years old, I remember my dad brought home like an Apple II computer, one of the really early ones, where the screen was like black and white. It's only 2 colors and stuff. And I pretty much played games from very early age. So I was always interested in it. And pretty much as the computers got better and better and better, I kind of stuck with the industry a little bit. So I would play games like Wolfenstein and Doom. I don't know if you guys know.
Of course,
they're like classic first-person
Yeah.
shooters and stuff. I played games like Descent and Mech Warrior, and pretty much kept my eye on the PC gaming industry. And at some point when I was like teenage, like maybe 16 or 17, I started doing like mods for games, which is where you can pretty much like take a game and change some elements of it, like maybe the textures or the sounds, or you can inject your own content into the game. And so online at that point, it was very early days back in the internet, so the internet was kind of new, but pretty much there was a small community of like modders, and they would basically come together, do modifications, and then release like packs. So you could kind of download a pack with like new levels, with new sounds, new enemies, this kind of stuff. And eventually I met a few guys from different places in the world, like from the US and one guy from the Netherlands. And we basically created packs together, and then we formed a really small team. And we ended up releasing some of those packs like commercially. And from there, we basically decided to start a studio. It was called Ratloop. So this was back in like 1996, or a very long time ago. So we made a few games, and we did pretty well, but after a while, because we were all very young, I think I was like 19 years old at the time, we'd actually relocated to the US to form the first version of Ratloop. So we ended up splitting, and basically the 2 guys who were already in the US stayed there, and then me and the guy from the Netherlands, we basically went home. And then a lot of time passed, and everybody did their own thing, got their university degrees, or went into full-time work and stuff like that. And for me, I'd worked at several companies like in Australia, because I was basically living in Australia at the time. So I worked for a few game companies there, and eventually, like 15 years later, I came to Canada to work for Ubisoft. And so I stayed there, I worked there for a long time. That's where I met Vivian, and that's pretty much led us up to today.
Okay. So, cool. And what was your favorite mod that you could think of back then? What was the game that you modded, or what did you...
Jeez, I think there was probably a level pack. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like a pack for Doom 2.
Okay.
And it was a string of levels that it was maybe like 6 or 7 new levels, and they were just expertly crafted. And I think the guy who made them actually went on to work at id Software, which is the company that made Doom. So I think it was actually called the Raven pack.
Okay.
And eventually they actually started their own company, which became quite successful. So it was basically a couple of guys, I think. I don't know if they were brothers or something, but I really don't remember. But yeah, they pretty much did such a good job with they made their own little mini campaign inside of that. and it got really successful, and they ended up either working with id or working closely with id, and they started up their own studio, which is called Raven Software. I'm not sure if it's still around today, but they actually released quite a few big games.
And
So
why
that
the
was
name?
inspirational, yeah.
And why the name Ratloop? I'm just curious. What was the reason for that?
Honestly, we wanted to have a very symbolic, like our logo or something very iconic, because we wanted people to see our logo and then never forget it. So if they ever saw it again, they would instantly kind of know, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Maybe they didn't know where or what, but visually it's very, very strong. So the whole name is based around the logo. And we basically had some visual designs made first. And from that, we kind of crafted, the concept of the rat, which basically is chasing its own tail. So it's good to show some kind of motion there. And yeah, it was primarily done through visual iconography, I would say.
And yourself, Vivian?
Well, I'm born and raised in Montreal, and I pretty much worked in marketing for most of my career. I went to JMSB, a bachelor's in commerce with a major in marketing and a minor in entrepreneurship and small business management. So I've always been interested in starting my own business, but I think back when I was younger, it was more like crafting things myself and trying to sell them. I remember I made like
selling macaroni necklaces.
I think I remember when I was like in 6th grade, I had made like $8 selling bracelets that I made and would sell them for like 25 cents. And that was like such a huge thing to make like $8 when you're like 11 years old. So yeah, I've always had like that type of personality. Like I'm not like so much of a follower. I like leading more. And so when I started working, my first job was in a big company. I worked for Rogers Media, I worked for TVA, and I kept going from big to smaller and smaller and smaller. And the last place that I worked at was another startup. We were about 15, and I preferred that. I prefer having a big part in a small thing than being a number in a really big thing. And so when I was at the startup, I got really hands-on on everything that was more not just marketing related, but also administrative and just how a business runs, and everything from doing some like small like bookkeeping to HR and working with people. And so I met James when I was there, and then so James is the most passionate person I know, I think, about video games. He always is thinking, talking, researching, reading about them. And throughout
but I'm not a nerd.
But he's not a nerd. And throughout our whole relationship, pretty much, he had always mentioned that it was a dream for him to give it another shot. And I think he felt, I'm not supposed to talk about myself, I'm talking about you there, but he felt as if he wouldn't be successful if he didn't do that, if he didn't give it another shot. So we found out about this grant that the government offers, and it was giving us the chance to actually start something. Because the way that video games work, like you guys know, it's not like if I decide to make t-shirts, it takes me, let's say, a day to make a t-shirt and I can sell it right away the next day. So you have constant revenue stream. With video games, you have to work for as long as you can, pretty much. Mm-hmm. So you could end up working for 2-3 years if the production of your game is like a high scope. And there's no revenue stream during that whole time. So you have to have an upfront investment to be able, and a huge upfront investment depending on how many people that you want on your team. And usually people who work in video games are highly skilled individuals, and it's trades that are in demand. So it's expensive to hire them also.
Canada, it's like the assistance that the government provides and that the province provides. It's like it's almost unmatched anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, it's like unbelievable.
Like in Singapore and in Australia and in Europe, they have like funding and grants, but the amount that they give is like 1/5 or maybe even less than 1/5 of how much the government gives out here. So they really support.
But it's not. They support innovation. It's not a grant for video games. It's a grant for innovation. So it could be innovation in film, innovation in game. Right? It could be anything.
But they're trying to attract people who work in technology and who kind of are on the cutting edge of like what's happening in the world in terms of technology and stuff. And they're trying to like build a hub here.
Yeah, and creating
Montreal,
jobs and everything, right?
Which seems to be really working because it's like the people that I come in contact with in the industry, it's like they're from all over the world, which means people are coming from many, many, many countries just to work here and live here,
So you find a lot of people, let's say in the States, that don't have these type of programs that go like the Kickstarter route.
Sure.
Or release a super early alpha.
Or like we said, they work from their basements and maybe they have full-time jobs and then they work at night or they have part-time jobs. So that's what we tried to do at first. We were still both at our jobs, but I worked a lot at my old job, like 60 hours a week. So it was hard for me because I had to build a business plan to submit to the government, and they're giving you a lot of money, right? They're funding up to 75% of your production costs to build a game. So imagine how much that could be over the span of a couple of years. So they ask for a lot of documentation. We tried to do it as I was working. No time, like, 3 o'clock in the morning trying to fill out some forms and all that stuff. So we decided to
just go for
go for it. There was no point. I left my job and I dedicated 100% of my time just working on this pitch, this document, which we submitted to the government, and then crossed our fingers and waited because it takes time for them to get back to you. It was December 22nd. We're driving. I'm like on an overpass, and I get an email. And then I tell James
check
my phone because every email I was getting, I thought it would be them answering us. And he checks it and he reads it and he pretends to be disappointed. And then I
was like, no way.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah, of course.
I'm like, no fucking way. I basically reacted really, really negatively, but
and I was like, what? And I'm like driving, I'm screaming, and then he tells me, he's like, we got it, and I just screamed, I think, just screaming for 5 minutes, and then crying.
Yeah, she went through a whole range of emotions.
And then I had to park the car, and then we celebrate. We're super happy.
It's actually a lot of work. You have to submit I guess 100-page presentation, but each page is not just words; it's research as well. So I think combined we spent a lot of time, months, on the internet searching for stuff, coming up with a business plan. It's a lot of work, especially because we were doing stuff at working day jobs and stuff. And then at the end of all that work, it pays off.
There's so much stuff going on in our lives, and you still. I think I mentioned it to you guys. We're still in a relationship. You don't want your whole lives to be just about this one thing. You still want to spend time doing other things, seeing your friends and this and that. So it was hard, and it had to be all worth it in the end. And it was a really nice Christmas present, because we're gonna go. If they tell us bad news on December 22nd, that would suck for the holidays. So then we had really nice holidays. We were just really, really excited and couldn't wait.
As much as you're happy that it happened, well, now it's real. Now
But
it's it sinks in. You're like, shit.
Yeah, now I gotta do
what
something.
What did we do? Holy crap!
But I think that's something that's where that's where we balance each other off. Our skills are so complete polar opposites of each other that maybe we'll consult each other for certain things, but it's I can't really make decisions for the things that he does, and he can't really make decisions for the things that I do. So it makes it really easy for us to work together without having to fight. So now,
there's a clear line. It's pretty easy to determine who should decide what.
Yeah, and who's responsible. Who's the specialist in one and has knowledge.
So that kind of works to our favor, I think. So we don't
Well, you guys decide based on a video game, right? You play NHL or Madden, and whoever wins that match.
Halo 1.
Yeah. Don't choose your favorite game.
I'll just pop the deep.
All the discs are broken.
You didn't believe me that I could beat you.
Wow,
You were pretty shocked.
I was
the
very
first time we
surprised
played.
how good you were.
Yeah,
She was
I kept bragging about it when we started dating. I'm so I would say I'm so good at Halo 1. You don't understand.
And I'm like, good for a girl, right?
Yeah.
That would wrap it all around.
Oh, I can see Vivian battling that one up.
So was it pistol all day?
Sorry?
And Halo 1 was a pistol all day?
Pistol and shotgun.
Nah, her specialty's the grenades.
And grenades.
She would kill me with the grenades all the freaking time. It's like she just know where I'm gonna run. I'm like, okay, this time I'm gonna run the opposite way.
You're just predictable.
I want to touch back on you mentioned play first environment.
Yeah.
A very play oriented. Obviously,
Yeah.
the game industry on it. And Matt, you mentioned there's some new trademarks, some new IPs in the industry. I just want to touch on that and get Ratloop Canada's
So
comment on
I think a lot of the video game industry now has like a defocus on gameplay, and the games that really do stand out from a hit that came out of nowhere, it does have that unique gameplay. And then let's say from the indie perspective, in Montreal there was Fez that came out, and everybody was like, "Wow, never seen anything like that." So when you guys are designing based off gameplay, and you have AAA titles coming out that are pushing for we'll release a game, but then we'll entice you to spend more money on the add-ons, whether it's a cosmetic add-on or a advantage add-on, like a pay to win kind of situation. What do you guys think of that as game developers? Like, when you're designing a game, do you think it's ever fair to do a pay to win environment? How do you see that whole scenario?
Absolutely not. I'm completely against it for us. I mean, I think a lot of these companies are doing this because, to be honest, like I've seen the full spectrum of development, like huge projects down to the smallest project. The demand from the public and the bar of quality, like what you expect for your $60 these days, it's just getting like astronomically high. Like you take something like Grand Theft Auto 5, which is a recent game. The amount of content in that is phenomenal. Like you did not understand how many people and how much production value went into that. And it's like, that's a game that's now like a couple of years old, and it's like, okay, so what's the next one gonna have to be? And what's the next one gonna have to be? And basically, it's like the cost of production and the number of people goes up and up and up. And it's getting to the point of like, where you can actually see the number of AAA games that are coming out is getting less and less and less, because even the big studios are having to consolidate their multiple brands into like single, 1, 2, 3 brands, because that's all they can develop, because they're becoming like massive blockbusters. Yeah. So in order to offset that cost, because they're still only getting like $60 per game. So it's like, I think the reason that they're going down these additional revenue stream avenues is to sort of support the rising costs in production, And it's like, it sucks because it looks, it feels like corporate greed, or they just want more money or whatever, but the truth is they're actually investing a lot more as well and taking bigger risks, because say you have a game with a budget of like $10 million, which is like a very small or medium-sized indie, and then you have a big open world game which maybe has a budget of like $150 million, like that's a huge investment. So it's like, if you do that and it becomes successful, then you want to be able to like secure your ability to make the next one and then the next one, It's like, so they're basically coming up with alternative funding methods to help them, fund their games, just like the way like Kickstarter kind of works. It's like an alternative method for small studios or small businesses to fund their projects, and that's kind of what they're applying there. So like, I understand why they're doing it. Back to your question, is it fair and good for the consumer? Hell no. I mean, it's like you feel like you're being asked to pay more, which you are, and it's a personal attack. And the way it's done, I think, is the issue really. It's like having something like a microtransaction model in your game. What it means is it has to change the design of the game to support that, right? Which means consciously somebody has to make the game get really hard or really boring, where you have to grind or play for a long time at a certain point in the experience in order for you to be motivated enough to put down a few bucks to unlock whatever you need to move on, right? So in terms of affecting the experience of, say, for example, you just have like a single player, like the golden pathway through a game. If the developer is asking you for microtransactions, it means that experience is going to come to a point of friction somewhere where you might be inclined, or they want you to be inclined to spend. And to me, what that does is it's starting to taint the intention of what that experience was, right? Imagine like you're playing Super Mario, you're going through, the flow is good, the way you go through the levels is good, and then all of a sudden you kind of hit this brick wall where it's like, oh, it's really difficult, I really need to spend this thing. Well, it starts affecting the art form, It's like, imagine in the middle of a movie you see like a 5 or 10 second YouTube roll, the ads that YouTube's starting to put inside of their videos. It's like, okay, at the beginning, at the end, or whatever, but in the middle, it's like, that sucks, It really, you're basically like, oh, you get pulled out of your experience. And if it's something that's like very immersive, you know, where you're completely engrossed in the material that you're consuming, and then all of a sudden this thing pops up and says, hey, buy this item for blah, 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 it just ruins the experience. So you need to be very careful when and how you show that stuff if you want to do it. So
Okay. And do you feel like in the current industry, a lot of people are saying, oh, games are getting easier and easier, but then a game like Dark Souls will come out, which I've broken controllers because of that game very easily.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very frustrating game, but it's still very successful, and people will grind, will redo a level, will figure out
Sure.
what frame I have to jump out to not get killed. Do you see people really getting segmented now as gamers?
Absolutely. Like, it's actually a lot of something that people don't realize or they don't think about too much is like, it's a pretty young industry, right? You know, video games are only like 20, 30 years old, and it's still growing. Like, it's not so much that, like what you're describing with Dark Souls, it's like a hardcore game for niche, you know, the niche hardcore market, whatever. It's not like that market's shrinking, okay? There's always people that are like that. And there's the same number of people 20 years ago who love a game like Dark Souls as there are today, probably more. The difference is that now more people are playing games. So you have mobile and casual, and there's a big push now for like, you know, like narrative only based games with like very minimal gameplay, like the walking simulators.
Yeah.
There's like online, free to play, like everything growing, okay? So it's like to make a game targeted towards a specific niche like that, it's totally fine. It's just a question of like, are you happy with your potential market being that many players? So say Dark Souls is selling to say 10 million potential customers, you know? And if your development cost is fairly low and, you know, selling 10 million
Warrants,
if it's okay, yes, it's all about the profit margin, right? It's only when you need to sell 15 million copies that you have to sell really wide that it becomes a big issue, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of games that are trying to cover the whole market, okay? So they're going really, really wide, and that's because probably their production budgets are really high. For somebody who makes like those hardcore games, it's okay, it's totally cool, and they should do that because the fans of those games
They're
are the
gonna
most loyal, right? People love Dark Souls more than people love the casual games, and the next one and the next one, those same people are going to keep coming back for more and more and more. As long as the company who makes it understands the size of their market and doesn't get too greedy and is happy to keep working in that space, they will always generate profit from their game, you know?
So for you guys, when you're designing your game, or Vroom Kaboom, can you go into the details of what it's about, how you decided, was it a game that you wanted to make, or was it a game that you wanted to make for a market? How did you go into deciding like what the game is? And
Sure. So for us,
But I think,
you want to start it?
well, I'll start and I'll let you get into the details of it. I think one of the things is that we knew we were going to be a small team. We were going to have a couple hundred people on it. We were going to be maybe 5 to 10 people. So we had to do something that, number one, we would be able to make as a small team and compete in a market of maybe people who have, we're still in the indie market, but there's indie studios who are a bit bigger.
Yeah.
So then there's certain items, things that you have to choose, am I going to be like up to par with this or that? So like with a small team again, in big studios, they have people who are dedicated to super specialists, like only doing like characters or only doing really specific things, and they're extremely talented at just that. And when the game comes out, sometimes you watch like clips and you think it was a movie, you're not sure, and then you're like, oh no shit, that was the game. So there's certain things that we knew we wouldn't be able to compete with, like the visual quality. Like I still think our game looks really nice, but I mean maybe not against people who have like a $20 million budget. So we knew right away that it had to be gameplay, because that, no matter how big the studio, if you have something that works, that it's fun to play, you don't have to be like
You can
200
buy it.
people.
You can buy it from the
People
audience.
will buy it, people will play it. So that's one thing. And then me and James, back then, we were really into Hearthstone, so we were playing that like all the time. And James,
You were playing like a junkie.
and James was really into Rocket League, which I tried. I just can't play it. It's too hard for me.
It's because you can't use a left
I
analog
can't
stick.
use a left joystick. All right. Okay. So I think that kind of brought in the whole action and then the whole strategic part of gaming. And I'll let James go from there,
You
because
done
then
now?
it was his baby. So
No, I mean, we just wanted to take something that would combine like the strategy elements of like something like Hearthstone, because
Yeah.
it's an amazing game. It's like phenomenally well made. You know, like those guys at Blizzard, they're like
Yeah.
top notch.
It's a card game, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. if
Oh, you know what it is?
I understand it. Anyway, it's
I'm
like,
not into the, but I get it.
it's super cool mentally, right?
Yeah.
Because you're challenged to do little evaluations of what's the best move. It's like chess, but not too hardcore, you know. And then for me, it's like I really love skill-based games. You know, things like soccer and shooters and anything where you really need to master like the movements with your thumbs and pressing the triggers at the right time.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really anything that had both of those elements together, you know. And so we pretty much decided
And we wanted to be innovative.
Well, right. So
Yeah, because the grant that we were saying, it's an innovation grant, so we couldn't
We
have
had
come
to do
out
something new,
with
yeah.
like V2 of Rocket League. It's not innovative. It had to be something that was different, that didn't exist. You had to really
So for us,
be
like
innovative.
one of our core philosophies, like as a game studio, is that we want to create new gameplay experiences. Okay, and like people, when you say that, sometimes you think, oh yeah, new levels, new weapons. No, we mean like totally new gameplay experiences where, like, the challenge that the game throws at you is something that you've never encountered before. And so this is why we tried to make you have to think strategically while you're driving, is something that you haven't really encountered before, and it's a new experience, and it's really cool. And again, like something Viv touched on, we're extremely limited in scope and production capability, so we had to build something that was very core and simple but scalable, you know. So our game, it's been functional from a very early age. You know, we pretty much had the game up and running within the first few months. Okay, it's an online game, you can play against your friends and stuff. And then what we do, we've got a model where we can just add content, like add new vehicles to the game, new cards, you know, something that's very easy, but we can kind of stop whenever we need to. All right, so it's like the game's very modular and it's built in little chunks. So we can have, like, say 2 chunks and then the game's finished, or we can have 10 chunks and the game's
It's
shippable.
your like a always shippable model.
It's always shippable, right?
Yeah.
And if we have time, we'll just add another few of these and another few of these. And the more we have, the cooler the game is, but it still functions even with the bare minimum.
But
So
it's-
that was like...
I assume that when you're adding in one model, one extra card, especially if you're trying to go off the gameplay, the balance of everything.
Sure.
Like one extra module after 10 is a lot harder than your second module you put in the game, because now everything has to interact with each other. So
That's true. It's like the way they interact is controlled. So,
Okay.
yes, it's right. I'm counting the time it takes to balance and tune the gameplay
Yeah.
in each of those modules, you know. So, for example, we could say in 1 month, we probably have the capability to add like 3 or 4 new vehicles into the game with their unique tuning and stuff like
Maybe
that.
you could talk a little bit about what the game is,
Yeah, sure.
so it'll be easier to understand when you're talking about adding stuff.
Well, we basically have a game. It's a duelling game. So it's kind of like a battle for road domination.
Okay.
So in most car games, you kind of race or drive together. With our game, you actually drive head to head. Okay.
It's a face-off.
It's a face-off, right? So you basically have like 3 phases to the game. It's like you can deploy your vehicle. Okay. You can drive your vehicle, and then you can destroy your opponent. Okay. Now this is all happening in real time, so there's no like literal phases. You're just playing freeform, whatever you want. So you build a deck, kind of like in Earth. So you can build a deck of cards, and those cards represent different types of vehicles. So you could have like a truck, a motorbike, a tank, a helicopter, you know, a bug, you know, all these different categories of vehicles, and they have different costs. Okay, so you get to play them against your opponent one at a time, usually, but you can play multiple. And then you can jump into them and drive them. So you can switch between them, all right? And my vehicles are going to drive down the road towards my opponent, and he's going to send his vehicles towards me. And then they meet in the middle and crash into each other. So if you play a big semi-trailer and I play like a little motorbike, boom, his truck's going to wipe my motorbike out. But there's like 3 lanes on the road, so I can like choose to avoid, I can dodge. Okay, so it's kind of like...
There's a lot of little other tactics
so
involved
it's very strategic, but very
There's like
action-based as well.
resources.
So there's the macro strategy, but then the micro of actually.
Exactly right.
tactics and
So yeah, I mean, you
everything,
can drive your motorbike, and because it's small, it can take this side lane, but the truck can't access that, so you can quickly dodge around the truck, get to the end and do damage to the enemy. There's tons of ways. There's like
We're still working on ways to explain how the game works.
it's difficult,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Because
difficult to
it's not
explain.
exactly like any other game. You know?
Yeah.
You could say it's like
it's pretty much
Hearthstone
there's no
meets
game.
Twisted Metal, or Hearthstone
Yeah.
meets Rocket League, and then people kind of understand, but it's still very unique.
Even Rocket League, when I started playing, I think I showed you playing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my brother's like, it's very fun, start playing. I'm like, okay. Then he joins in the game, he's like flying in the air. I'm like,
Yeah.
how the hell are you doing that? It's like,
It's-
you have no rank right now. Wait till you get lower. And I was like, at the beginning, it's very fun.
Yeah.
But then if you're gonna grind and get good, and like it's not very intuitive how to fly
Sure.
in Rocket League, and it's your timing is everything.
Yeah.
But the satisfaction of getting that first hit, that first goal with that is amazing,
cool,
and that's
huh?
what keeps you going, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's no, I definitely agree that even though it's something that you can't really explain, you take a car, you fly, and you hit soccer balls.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make sense. But once you see it, once you get it, like
Yeah.
it's
So that's what I think, because we chose to a game that's, we had, like right now James explained it, we had even more trouble a couple of months ago.
We're getting there,
We're
yeah.
getting there, and that's a job that we have to really work on, is how to communicate how this game works, but we're getting closer and closer to what it is.
Finding a good way to do
Yeah,
it,
to
yeah.
finding a good way to explain it, because we chose a game that doesn't exist. It's not a specific genre. There's no game really that's like that.
It's a mashup of multiple games.
Yeah, that's what we wanted it to be, right? Innovative, and we can play the game in VR and everything. So it's like, it's different, right? It's almost like brings you back to when you were a kid and you were taking cars and you were in the sandbox and you were smashing them together. Like that's how the VR gameplay feels, you know?
okay.
So we're getting there. So if you speak to us in like a couple months, we'll probably be able to tell you like in one sentence what
and,
the game
and
is.
a good thing that comes out of it is we started like play testing, like frequent play test now. So we're now exposing the game for the first time to many people, and we're starting to identify the questions that are common. It's like, but what do I do here? I don't understand this, or I don't understand that. So we're starting to understand the things that people don't understand when they have their first contact experience, and so then we're going to identify solutions to those things, and ways to explain it, But it takes time for this process to like test, iterate, iterate. So we're currently going through that, and we're going to simplify a bunch of stuff and make it easy to understand and easier to play. So.
What's your? I'm just actually you want.
Yeah, no, for getting a lot of the new games that I discovered was either through YouTube videos of gamers that I watch, and it is sponsored content, and make it very clear, or on streams on Twitch and all that. Is that a strategy that you guys plan to implement at one point? Contacting someone that has a following, plays similar video games, hey, test this out, tell me what you think.
Yeah, and I think it's not like I know you're talking about sponsored content. I think maybe I would say 3-4 years ago, a lot of people would do sponsored content and we just didn't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, and now they say it, and I think it's better to be transparent. It's okay if you want to say this is sponsored content, and at least we know as a consumer. And if we choose to listen to them anyways, that's our choice. We will. I think right now we're working on building a community. Because we haven't really started sharing that much information about the game. It's not a secret, it's just that we just haven't started sharing that much information about
It's also, with 6 people in the team, it's like,
Yeah.
it takes considerable time to prepare
even
the
to say
stuff,
like I need like a marketing piece, like marketing material, it takes time,
Somebody
because
has to build it,
somebody
right?
has to do it, but this person's working on something else and this and that. So
Well, I'm curious, how do you even like what marketing wise? Because you have a point. How are you going to get this out there in the market? To
we unfortunately have an extremely small
budget.
marketing budget. I think one thing is we're going to probably try to stand out a little bit because of the VR component. I mean, our game is a game which competes with any other game, and so far having trouble a little bit explaining what the game is, I think that doesn't help. So once we get that down, one thing we stand out in more, that people understand more, is VR. People understand the difference between VR and a regular game. So the market for VR games is smaller, number one. And number two,
It's less competitive.
it's different. We don't have the typical VR game where it's like immersive, where you put your mask on and then, your headset on, and then you walk through like a zombie land and you kill people and all that stuff. It's actually like a gameplay VR game. Like you're in the world, but it's not to scare you or to experience certain things. It's like you're still experiencing like the game, but you're playing. I don't know how to explain it. Like you're really
You're actively mentally and physically
playing the game. It's like
It's-
it's just in a VR world versus because VR games are trying to recreate a reality. Like when you have to play a zombie attack game, for example, they're trying to make you because zombies don't exist. So now you want to be in a world where zombies exist. So then you're wearing a VR headset, and then it's the real world, but there's zombies. You know, they're just recreating a fantasy world. So we're not trying to recreate a fantasy world. We're trying to let you play this game,
It's more like a sport or something.
but in a VR context, right? So I think that's where we're also different in VR. So there's not many games that are like that yet, because so far all the games are trying to recreate certain like an environment for you to be scared or have
Immersed.
feeling and be immersed and everything. So that's where I think we're gonna try to differentiate ourselves too. Given our limited budget, I think we're just gonna have to really choose the channels and the items in our marketing toolbox right now that are going to be the most profitable and just bring back as much visibility as possible. And we will work with a PR agency also. And I think a big important thing too is we're going to try to participate to like as many events as we'll be able to. Like for example,
trade shows.
trade shows, like there's MIGs in December, so we're going to attend that. There's PAX, we're going to go to PAX, and E3, like hopefully we'll go to
see,
E3, like, so we're going to attend the most events possible and try to get
Be
people
present.
to talk
That's good
about
for
our
like
game.
press exposure, you know. So there'll
Yeah.
be a few people who write articles, and it kind of helps propagate. And
Yeah.
you know, some people see the name, which we have the name Vroom Kaboom, so it's quite memorable again when you can
Yeah.
see that, you know. So hopefully once people see it a couple of times, they'll start to
Yeah.
pay attention and maybe go click on something.
And there's
you
also
know.
always the option of having publisher too, and then you never know, right? So like we discussed, like where our game is playable on Oculus, so maybe we'll talk with Oculus and see if we can make a deal there. Like these are all things up in the air that I'm mentioning, but you never know. Sometimes distributors, they want to help you also put your game up front. So I think it'll be easier when we're very close to having like a nice vertical slice of the game, where because like we said, there's like many little components that you can add, and then once one's really good, we could start really sharing more. So we're already like PlayStation developers, but like sharing more with PlayStation and Oculus and everything to see and get their feedback too on certain things, and then getting their involvement, because if it's something that they're interested in early, then they'll help you
And
with
we
your
are
marketing.
launching on a lot of platforms,
Yeah.
which I'm hoping will help. So we've got like PC on Steam, we've got HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, we've got PlayStation 4 and PlayStation VR.
Yeah.
So it's like there's
Very
a lot
optimistic.
Of, a lot of stores there.
Yeah.
So it's going to potentially be in this store and that
Yeah.
store and that store and that store. So maybe that'll create more exposure.
and the audience is looking for VR experiences, new.
I think
new
for
stuff,
that,
so
like
maybe
for
that
us, we
one-
consider the VR because the game is like super playable with or without VR.
Yeah.
Like you don't need VR to play it. I mean,
But really fun in VR.
it's really cool in
Yeah.
VR, but we're kind of hoping that'll help us get a little bit of visibility, because in the VR space only, it's fairly unique and there's
Yeah.
not that much competition. Like
Yeah.
in regular like PC Steam, I think there's like over 100 games a day launched.
I think
There's
more than that,
tons
yeah.
and tons and tons. In the VR space, it's not that saturated.
Yeah.
So for us, it's potentially a way. It's like a window into visibility, and you say, hey, you know what? This you don't need to play this in VR, but maybe you still read about it or something because of that. You know. So that's kind of like something we're trying to use in lieu of having a lot of marketing budget, is to try and use the VR as a platform to showcase the game.
And like you mentioned, I think a lot of our time is going to be spent with contacting ambassadors, gamers, people who want to play and test it. It's pretty much, I think, going to be most of our budget's going to be in
That,
digital
yeah,
media
yeah.
and that, and maybe sponsored content and stuff like that.
Because
Yeah.
the cool thing with VR, and this I speak for my brother, he was one of the, as soon as the VR came out for Steam, the one that they officially launched, he bought it. Pretty expensive when it launched. I think it's still pretty expensive piece of equipment.
The HTC? Yeah, it's
And-
like over $1,000. Yeah.
So he set everything up. And now my brother, like, he's the kind of guy, Steam sale comes on, he buys all the games, he plays 3 of them, and it's just in his library.
Yeah, he never plays.
It's
Yeah.
kind of
Everybody's like,
exactly. But I remember when I told him, "Oh, which VR games do you have?" He's like, "Well, there's not many."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was showing the one where you're shooting like things in the
Space
sky,
pirate
you have a
train.
shield.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, like it's cool, but you know,
The wow factor kind of cool.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just-
Yeah.
yeah, you get
so you have really nice technology,
longevity's on there.
but then the game is like you're just trying to find that one game that's gonna make you go, "Wow, this is amazing."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And
feel like a
also-
lot of
The
people
thing
are
is
just
that
willing
it
to
takes-
try at
it
that
takes,
point.
People don't realize it takes like years to make a good game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the VR is not that old, huh? If you wanted to make like a great game for VR, I would say it's going to take you 3 years. So probably those full-length experiences, they're being developed
Yeah.
now. They probably won't even be out next year. Maybe in 2019.
Yeah.
You start seeing that killer app, which is what you're talking about. This one game which is unbelievably amazing and cannot be played outside of VR because of the cool
Yeah.
interaction.
And it's a gateway game that everyone
Exactly right.
gets introduced
It's just
to.
it takes a long time to make a great game.
But
Like-
there's also the fact that I think you did mention when you were talking about our game is that we wanted to create a game, like we use games as service as a like a motto, I guess, because we don't want to create a game every year, like pump out games
Yeah.
after game. We wanted to create a game
As a platform.
that it's a platform, and then you could play, I guess, like a League of Legends or something
Yeah.
that you could play forever if you really
Lots.
wanted to.
It's one map, right?
Yeah.
In reality, it's one.
Yeah.
Everybody's playing the same map for all these
and
years.
then we would add on to it. We'd have downloadable content that you
Yeah.
that maybe yearly downloadable content or something. So this is a game that you would be able to play for like 10,000 hours if you wanted to. So that's our motto, and I think if possible, every game that we're going to release, we're going to try to follow that motto also.
On that note, we usually end our podcast with a funny question, really tailored to you
Okay.
guys. So you can either answer it separately or together. I like you make your decisions.
We can answer for each other.
Oh, that'll be worse.
Let's see what the question is first.
Yeah.
So you're stuck on an island. You have a 60-inch screen in front of you. You can choose one platform, one system, and 3 games.
Okay, a gaming system.
One
Okay,
gaming
the
system
system
and
we
3
can
games.
agree.
I don't think it's fair because I'm feeling PC Master Race over here.
No,
That's what I'm feeling over
So
here.
let's do separate then. Let's do
No, I think we could agree on the platform, and it would be PS4.
I've seen
I
PC
would take
Master
PC,
Race. I've
yeah.
seen PC Master Race over here.
Oh.
Honestly, I come from a hardcore PC gaming background, but I'm also a huge fan of like Uncharted and Naughty
Yeah.
Dog, and like there's basically genius, epic games coming out on both
Are we stuck
platforms. so-
together or alone? That makes it different.
Okay, you know what? Let's do this. You're stuck in your own island.
Okay.
This way
You have to play alone.
You have to play well,
Okay.
and you can choose how you wanna. I mean,
We could network.
you can
right?
network. You got a landline. You got Wi-Fi going on this thing.
You're stuck there, but you still have a network.
Exactly. What would be your tailored platform then, Vivian? What
Okay,
would you
for
choose?
sure, me it would be PlayStation.
And what would be and why these 3 games that you're gonna tell us?
Oh,
about?
I was gonna say shit. Can I say shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Because I want to play Halo, but then I can't play Halo on PlayStation.
We'll
This is all our problems. This is growing up. This is what we have.
Okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna have our own islands. We're both gonna have an Xbox One, which is connected, and then we're gonna play Halo 1 against each other.
Perfect. And what's the other 2 games?
But I'm gonna win them.
Yeah, sure. Street Fighter.
Yeah, we could try that.
We play Street Fighter a lot together.
I have to mention Counter-Strike because I think that's the game that I've sunk more hours into than anything else. you know?
1.6.
Yeah, the old
Gold.
stuff. No, 1.6 and before. Just thrashed the shit out of that game. Like it was fantastic, you know.
But
So
it's
that's
good to
one of
have
mine.
different games, right? Because we have a first-person shooter, and now we have Street Fighters, and like I don't want to have 2 first-person shooters. I
But
don't
you say
It's
1.6.
hypothetical.
You can play the surf. You can play the.
I guess
She's like
boring.
really worried.
No, but this is the modern here, because then you can get the surf maps, or just literally you played that, right?
Which one?
The surf maps in Counter Strike.
No, I never saw that.
It's all
Is that more
gravity.
recent?
Yeah, you're like literally
Oh, okay.
surfing around using the gravity engine
yeah.
and trying to go up.
Too funny. Well,
Surf Strike.
So tell us how could people
And
reach you?
Tetris.
Oh, Tetris.
She's very good at Tetris.
Did you ever have
Okay.
Tetris streams?
Yes, because when I play Tetris like obsessively
Yeah.
sometimes. Like you know when you play like on level like 13 and
Yeah,
it just rains like stuff, and then I close
It's
my
like
eyes,
fully
and that's all I
subconscious.
see.
I used to have nightmares of like not being able to get the line. I used to be so mad, and I'm like, it can't be I'm the only one. I look at Tetris trees, I'm like, oh god, I've gone crazy.
Yeah, seriously.
I never understood that. Like, I would watch her play Tetris. I'm like, how are you doing that? It's
Yeah,
you know, it's like
It's-
it's like your brain just kicks into autopilot. And,
It's amazing.
yeah.
I think I would have to play. And then I could be alone then on the island.
you
if
don't-
I
you
had
don't need
Tetris,
me.
I don't need you.
I'll just stay home.
Imagine Tetris VR.
Nah, you need it's a frame.
You guys already experienced it. That's his Tetris dream. It's a nightmare. you like your house is shattering as you're not
You're
leaving.
making me nervous right now.
It's life or death situation.
Live or death Tetris.
Oh man.
That's a horrible idea, but it would probably work.
So let everyone know how can they reach Ratloop Canada, which platform, social media platforms, email guys.
Well,
how can someone reach
we're
out
the
to you?
most active, I guess, on Facebook. You can message us there. We have a website, ratloopcanada.com. We have an Instagram page.
Twitter.
I wouldn't even tell you. You can follow us.
We
on
just launched it last week or
So
whatever.
our platforms are pretty new, but I think the one where it's easiest to reach us would be Facebook.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, guys.
Cool,
It's a
thanks.
pleasure.
Yeah, it was
fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you liked this week's episode. And if you'd like to reach out to us or just want to simply check out our previous episodes, visit our website, Montreal Marketeers, that's with 2 E's.com. You can also download our weekly episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
I hear the baby cry, waiting for the bottle to come. I heard the Lord say, battle has